Welcome to the Nairobi Health Show. I've got Rick Olderman on the line with me. Rick, how are you?
I'm great, Dave. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Let me read the short bio I have for you so that people get a feel for who you are and what we're going to talk about. It's a very important topic. Rick Olderman is a sports and orthopedic physical therapist with more than 25 years experience that specializes in helping people with chronic pain to experience a pain-free life. Rick has written the popular Fixing You series of books found on Amazon.com to help people with chronic pain or injuries, and also has home courses that we'll be talking about as well. So, Rick, a very interesting field that you've been in.
It has kept me on my toes for the last 25 years. So I've been very happy with it.
Well, and from what I can tell, the last 25 years is probably fairly pivotal in your field. I imagine the information you learned when you were studying in college or whatever certifications or whatever you took for this, I bet everything is different 25 years later.
You know, what's interesting is that some things are different and other things are not. And
Huh.
the reason why I kind of went into in developing this whole approach to solving pain is because what I learned at school wasn't really helping in the real world in terms of more chronic issues. And I was great with acute issues, but chronic issues just not good at all. And I really realized I had to rethink this. And
Huh.
so I've developed this whole approach. But in my orthopedic clinic here in Denver, over the many last years, I've had to train other therapists to because if you were going to work at my clinic, you could only treat the way that I wanted you to treat,
Right.
because I know it works. It works really well. And
Right.
so in training all of these other new grads and so forth, I realized that none of them are being treated are learning the systems approach that I've developed. And it's just like when I was in PT school. It's this component approach to looking at pain rather than a systems approach, which is really how our body works.
Okay, so I'm gonna put out a little case study, my own case study here to kind of get the conversation started, okay? Because I've had
Great.
some really interesting epiphanies about pain management. I've had shoulder pain for quite a long time, and I've dealt with that naturally with turmeric. We have our own product, Mimi's Miracle Turmeric, as well as a simple glucosamine chondroitin. So for physical, for just stuff I take, I've tried to do it naturally and avoid the cortisone shots whenever I could, that type of thing. Do good mobility work, those types of things. But I finally ended up having surgery on June 1st of this year, actually. Finally, it was just too much. I had two rotator cuff muscles that were completely disengaged
Mm.
in a small accident that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, because there's a bone spur, there was arthritis, and there was two rotator cuff muscles torn. And they put me back together. And of course, then you're, in a sling for a while
Yes.
and dealing with the pain of surgery. And then I got an overuse injury on the other side because now I only have one arm to do all the work
Right.
that two arms used to do. And so now I
Yes.
got an inflamed labrum over here, which is driving me. So I have two shoulders in a lot of pain. I'm going through the physical therapy. I'm doing everything that the physical therapist tells me to do at home. And I'm trying to rehab this thing the best I can. And interestingly, as far as the pain management goes, for I would say the first 3 months, they were really, really holding me back. Like, don't do too much. Take this really easy. Don't re-injure yourself. You don't want to end up back in a surgery. So really pay attention to the pain. And then suddenly, once I'd gained some strength and was doing light weight training and all these different motions the physical therapist had me doing, all of a sudden it was like a switch turned and he was watching me try to lift my arm over my head and going, Dave,
Hmm.
do that again and force your shoulder to move how it should, even if it's painful. So, well,
Hmm.
you told me to avoid pain. He
Hmm.
goes, yeah,
Right.
not anymore. We're 90 days in now. Now the pain you're dealing with, you got to work through. You just got to work this and get your shoulders back to move. And so it was like a switch. It was from pay close attention to your pain, otherwise you're going to re-injure yourself, to okay, now it's do the exercises, push yourself, and you gotta work through this. So, and I hope, of course, to be pain free. I'm not pain free yet. So now you are a physical therapist, and so you must take people like me all day long, shoulder surgeries, knee, hip, all this stuff, right? There, people are
Yes.
coming to your clinic all the time.
Hmm.
And so let's just start with that little case study. And as a starting point, I guess, is it helped me as a layperson understand this issue of when is pain warning us to stop because we're going to hurt ourselves?
Right.
And when do we keep going? How do we figure that out?
Yeah. So you're talking about a very specific issue with that shoulder. So
Yeah.
let's address your shoulder first. Okay. And then we can talk about pain in your question more broadly. So I'm assuming, let's see, is this going to be shown on video, Dave?
Yes, it is right now. It's live on YouTube right now.
Great.
People
Would
are
you
watching.
feel comfortable if I had you back up and so we could see how you raise your left arm and your right arm, and I'll show you what I'm talking about? Okay.
All right. You won't be able to hear me so well, but
no, that's fine. So turn your left arm to the camera.
Like this? You reach
sideways. Turn sideways so that your left, turn your body sideways so your left shoulder is facing the camera. There you go.
Gotcha. All right.
Your lighting isn't the greatest back there, but let's just see if we can see it. All right. So go ahead and raise your
drapes. Let me see what that does.
Or and I don't expect you to do this, but if you're comfortable, if you take off your shirt, I'll be able to see a lot more. So if you don't want to do that, I get it. So don't worry. We'll try it with the shirt on if you want.
As if the shirt on. It'll be a pain to get back on, actually.
All right. So go ahead and raise up your left arm overhead.
Overhead from the side?
To the front. To the front.
To the front. Okay.
Okay. So folks, I want you to look at how much his back is arching to do that. And you can get a sense for how that shoulder is moved. So bring that back down, Dave, and do it about a quarter of that speed.
Right in here, it's painful and tight.
Bring it back down. Bring it back down. So folks, look at stop right there. Folks, look at, he doesn't have much shoulder blade motion at this point. Keep going, Dave. Now it's finally started to kick in, but it's way too late. All right. Now what I'm going to ask you to do, Dave, is turn the other shoulder to the camera. So now we're going to look at your surgical shoulder, right? And folks,
the first one is the one was operated on. This is the one with the labrum inflammation.
Okay. Okay. Good. So that was the surgical. That was the surgical. So your left was your surgical.
That's right.
Got it. Okay. So now let's see your right one. Yeah. So bring it back down again.
Okay.
And now go about a quarter of that speed, so everyone can see. Stop. Bring it back down. Right about a little bit lower. Right about there. Okay, if you go up from here, you will start to see that his shoulder blade is moving earlier in the motion. Okay, and if you look at the other surgical shoulder, you'll see that the shoulder blade is moving later in the motion. And so what is happening here, the shoulder, you can have a seat now, Dave. Thanks. The shoulder blade is the center of function for the upper extremity system. And what I'm going to guess is that up until now, your therapist has only been looking at shoulder range of motion and not scapular motion.
Right.
So our shoulders should achieve about 170, 180 degrees of motion. 60 degrees of that should be coming from our shoulder blade motion. 100 to 120 degrees of that should be coming from the shoulder joint motion.
Okay.
So this is very common with rehab for shoulders, is that the therapist is not focusing on shoulder blade movement, and they're only focusing on shoulder joint movement. And what happens is when the shoulder blade isn't moving well, then you get that impingement that you're running into because the shoulder blade isn't moving the way it should. All right. And so your arm is bumping up into the top of the shoulder blade as you're trying to raise that up, and that's painful. All right. Now I'm going to geek out just one more second because I want you to be able to talk to your therapist about this.
Okay.
There is a particular muscle that connects from the shoulder blade to the arm bone called the Teres Minor, and it's also there's a Teres Major too. And what happens is after surgery, that muscle goes into spasm and becomes shortened. So as you're raising your arm up in the air, your arm starts dragging the shoulder blade with it, rather than the shoulder blade pushing the arm up in the air. That's its role, is to help push the arm up. So if you mention that if the therapist, massages out that little Teres Minor and Teres Major muscles, then your shoulder will start, I can almost guarantee that it will go up higher with much less pain. and that you're going to start recruiting your scapular muscles to do things rather than just your shoulder muscles.
Okay, and to make this not completely about me now, to branch out, because other people,
Sure.
shoulder pain is a common thing,
Oh yeah.
but I imagine there's similar things with hips, knees, ankles, and so are you pointing out a fairly common issue you deal with in that sometimes it's not just where you feel the pain, but upstream or downstream from the pain, there's some other cause.
Very much so. In fact, what we're talking about now, Dave, with your shoulder, this is often the cause for neck pain and headaches too.
Ah,
Because the shoulder blade system is the foundational system. If we look at a skeleton, all right, and we see that it's all long bones. See these long, thin
yeah,
bones?
yeah,
Everything's long, thin bones, except for two areas. One is the pelvis. You can see that's a broad, flat bone, right? Okay, so
yeah,
the
yeah.
pelvis is the center of lower body and back function. Here's the other broad, flat bone, the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade is very much similar to the pelvis. It is the center of function for the upper body system, including the neck and head. So if you have chronic neck pain or headaches, just to what you said, most people will look at the neck or the head, but that's not where the solution is. Because the problem is actually in how the shoulder blade is moving, because
Interesting.
because there are things attaching from here into the neck and head. And so if the shoulder blade isn't working well, then that stress is transmitted via these muscles to the head. And as you mentioned, the hip
Okay.
too. Same with the hip. If the hip muscles aren't working well, then the whole pelvis doesn't work well, and that transmits stress to the back too.
Yeah, because back pain, of course, is possibly, well, you tell me, is back pain the most common chronic pain complaint in first world countries, or what if not,
By
what
far,
is?
by far, by
By
far,
far
it
back
is.
pain. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and you're
And
saying
the
that
most
that
misunderstood too, I feel.
interesting.
Yeah,
Well, maybe we should just morph into that then. So you've already introduced us to a
sure.
really great principle, which I would shorten into where you feel the pain isn't necessarily the cause of the pain. And so there's some
Yeah,
supporting system that probably needs to be looked at. So let's talk about that with the back then. So for those people listening who have lower back pain, which you say is the most common complaint, talk to us about some of the most common what's going on most
yeah.
commonly, and what should they be doing to address it?
Okay, so first of all, what I always find, people learn better when they can feel what's happening in their body themselves, just like you raising
Okay.
your arm, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to do the same with your listeners for back pain. So I'm going to ask everyone to lie down on the floor with your legs straight. And you could be on the couch or a bed, but a firm surface is better. And I want your legs straight out in front, straight out from you. I don't want the knees to be bent. And I want you to feel how your back feels in this position. And a lot of you who have had chronic back pain, you don't even need to do this test because you already know the answer. So now that you've had your legs straight and you can feel what your back feels like, now bend your knees so your feet are flat on the floor. And if that
Mhm.
doesn't make a difference in how your back feels, then hug your knees to your chest instead.
Okay.
So which position, legs straight or knees bent, would feel better for a back that's hurting, would you say, Dave? What do you think?
Oh, I know for me that as soon as my knees bend a little bit, I have relief on my back.
Absolutely. You and 99% of all other people with back pain. So what's the difference though between legs straight and knees bent? Well, it's easy to think that, oh, when my knees are bent, my back is flatter to the ground, which means then that in order to solve your back pain, we have to change the shape of your low back bones. But that's not really what's happening. When you bend your knees versus when your legs are straight, you're removing forces that are acting from your legs on your pelvis and therefore back. So what we're doing is we're removing harmful forces acting on your back, and your curve
Okay.
is assuming more of its natural curve the way it wants to be.
Okay.
When you have pain, it's in an unnatural shape. So there are a lot of things happening in your legs that are acting then on your pelvis, which then affects your low back. And so here's how it plays out in the real world. If everyone now stands up and they listen to the rest of your podcast, they'll notice that after about a minute or two, their knees will start locking backwards, if they're not already, into a straight position. This is an energy energy conserving move. You lock your knees so you don't have to use your leg muscles.
Right.
But if you're feeling your back right now, I'm going to ask you now to unlock your knees and soften them a little bit. And you'll feel maybe a subtle change to your low back when you do that. And if you don't feel that subtle change, lock the knees again, and you'll feel that your back arches more when your knees are locked, and it arches less when your knees are unlocked. So we found out two things. One, hey, my back feels better when my legs aren't straight, and it feels worse when it's more arched, right? And the second thing that we just found out is if I am standing any longer than a minute, I tend to lock my knees, which then arches my back and causes my back to hurt. So one simple solution would be to unlock your knees when you're standing and walking. It's, in fact, so much of back pain can be solved just by doing that little change in how you use your body. And this highlights kind of my whole approach is that we have to change how we're using our body to solve our chronic pain, because that's exactly why you're having chronic pain. And so not only how you're using your body causes the pain, but it causes your muscles to change in terms of strength or weakness or tightness or looseness. So we have to correct those things too in order to solve that. But it's very simple.
So the Fixing You series of books you created some time ago, and it sounds like those were very popular. Let's start with those. How long ago was that?
I wrote those about 10 or 12 years ago, and I sell about 3,000 to 4,000 a year.
Okay, interesting. But then from there, you've had some evolution and moved on to something new or more advanced?
Absolutely. So since then, that was before I owned my clinic. And so those books were written based on my observations of, seeing a few people at a time and starting to see how all of this works. But since I owned my clinic, I saw, of course, that you can imagine a huge volume of people coming through with all sorts of diagnoses and all sorts of ages. And so what it helped me realize was not only are the issues in my books happening, but they're happening in patterns in people. And it's the same pattern happening. For instance, if you have back pain, Dave, the same pattern that's causing your back pain is causing someone else's sciatic pain or causing someone else's SI joint pain. It's the same pattern. It's just manifesting differently in different bodies. And so what I've realized is that, if you look at my back pain book, there's like 80 different exercises in there to solve just about everything from head to toe, relating to back pain. But what I've learned in my clinic is no, we don't need 80 different exercises. I've honed it down to like 6 or 7 to fix the major things that are causing almost all back or sciatic or SI joint pain based on that my clinical experience these past 10 years.
And so what are those called, the new ones?
Well, it's called the Fixing You method. So my books are the Fixing You series on Amazon, and I called it the Fixing You method. And they're all found on my website, rickolderman.com, and you can find them all there. And if you type in Fixing You in the coupon code, you'll get 20% off your purchase, whatever you end up purchasing. And so it's using the same name because I figured, well, I've already started with this one, might as well stay with the same name.
So you've just added to your library, so to speak.
Exactly. There are 5 programs, one for back pain, one for hip, a knee, a foot and ankle, and then also a neck pain and headaches, which also solves shoulder issues as they relate to neck pain and headaches.
I see. So that's the one I need.
Yes. Well, you don't have neck pain or headaches yet, and hopefully your physical therapist will solve your shoulder issues. But if they don't, then you need my program, I think. Your story sounds similar to Kelly Starrett. You're probably familiar with Kelly Starrett and his work, Becoming a Supple Leopard. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And similar to you, he had like academic understanding, but then his wife started a CrossFit gym and he started seeing hundreds of people a week move incorrectly.
Yes.
And that like blew up his understanding of the human body. And your story is similar in that you discovered a lot of these things that sound like you've started the Fixing You series based on your clinical experience, but then you start a practice where all of a sudden the volume goes up and boom, you just start to have much more experience, much more volume. And that just kind of refined your ideas in your original Fixing You series. Is that kind of how that happened?
Absolutely. So that helped me refine my ideas. And also through training my therapists, I started to see where our thinking was wrong in terms of how to solve and look at chronic pain. So that's why I also developed the online training program for practitioners, is to train them how to see the body like this. It's much simpler to solve chronic pain looking at the body as a system than it is how we've been doing it in medicine. It's so much simpler.
And these are do-it-yourself at home things. So the person can get the guide for whichever area they need. By the way, I love the way you've broken it down. I like Starrett's book. The problem is it's kind of a Bible, and it feels like, oh my gosh, I gotta absorb a lot of information to use this thing.
Yeah.
But what you're describing is something sounds quite targeted. You choose the area, you get the guide, away you go.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that, because my original book was all one book. So all 6 books were all in one. So it was a Bible. And then I showed it to some people, and they said, I can't read all of this. This is just way too much. So then they said, if you can break this down, that would be so much more helpful. So that's why I broke it down into, I have 6 different Fixing You books on Amazon, all approaching these, joints and areas of the body like that. And so, yeah. So it's helpful. I've learned I need to keep things short and sweet with people, because then they'll do them. And that's what these home programs are. Much shorter, much sweeter than what I have in my books.
And I love the fact that they are natural and based on body mechanics and strength and getting movements to be correct. I would like to ask you though, for those people listening who maybe have injuries that are just never going to be 100%, or arthritis or those types of pain, do you deal with anything like that? And if so, is there certain topical treatments that you recommend, or certain pain management methods when a person just can't get where they need to be because of restrictions or an injury that's just never going to be quite repaired?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So first of all, I wouldn't trust that it couldn't be repaired until I actually tried to repair it myself.
A good point. Good point.
I've just found that a lot of practitioners, because they don't understand a system solution, they're doing the wrong things to solve pain. And I wouldn't say wrong things. They're just not looking big enough and doing the better things to solve pain. For instance, an arthritic hip is not a recipe for, oh, I just have to live with it and I just have to wait till I get my hip replaced. I mean, I've solved a lot of people who were ready to get hip replacement and completely taken away all of their pain.
Nice.
And they had these x-rays full of arthritic changes in their hips. So think of it this way. It's not so much that you have those changes on those x-rays or MRIs, like tears, disc bulges, arthritic changes. It's how you're using your body that's causing those things to be painful. Because there's so many studies showing people with disc bulges, tears, labral tears, arthritic changes that have no pain at all. And so it means that how you're using your body has a lot to do with why you're having pain. And so that is the hammer that's hitting that arthritis, not the arthritis itself or the disc bulge or the disc herniation or anything like that. It's how you're using your body that's stressing those areas. And maybe that's why they've developed those changes in them. So I hope, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And of course, that's really the best answer, because taking a more deep approach to causes before you jump into, pain management, medicine or anything like that is of course, that's better. Of course, we'd all rather remove the cause and remove the pain.
Yes. And speaking of causes, this gets into more your realm, Dave, but I have an overriding theory that I call it the 3 pillars theory, that we all have a threshold above which we have pain. Okay. Well, musculoskeletal issues are one of those pillars of things that pushes us up to that threshold. But dietary, allergens, mold, things like that is another pillar. And then the 3rd pillar is emotional, psychological, or traumatic events in our body. All 3 of those issues can create tension in our body in these patterns I was talking about earlier that drive us into pain. And so I focus mostly on the musculoskeletal side of things, you more with the nutritional supplemental side of things too. So there's so many, our bodies are amazing. There's just a lot of different things to explore. Please don't give up. If you have an x-ray with arthritis, and you think that you need to have a hip replacement because of it.
Okay, I love it. And now, it's interesting you mentioned the emotional side. I'm getting a certification right now in SSR, sleep, stress, and recovery, and they talk about a principle called deep health, where they are convinced that the focus on health through only physical methods, like in the case of nutrition and fitness being the pillars is a great word. It's often been thought that, hey, if you want to get in really great shape and have a great life physically, hit the gym and eat the right foods. But in deep health, they've identified some of the things that you just did, that there is emotion, there's stress, there's meaning of life issues. Now, some of this was championed in a way by the guy that wrote the Emotion Code book long ago. And I just wonder what you think about that, because that to me felt a little too out there, a little too woo-woo, that emotions get trapped in an area and that's causing the pain. And it starts to feel a little witch doctory to me, right?
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted, but at the same time, we do get that we are very complex beings, and that we do have emotions, and we have history, we have trauma, both psychologically and physically, and so I just wanted to put that out there as an example, and see your thoughts on that. You did mention emotion, and that could be involved in this whole thing. So, are you familiar with the emotion code concept?
I actually became certified in it.
Okay, well that
because
to a large, okay,
yeah, because I was curious. This was at a time when I was looking, because I felt that there was this battery that was charging our bodies in these patterns that were dysfunctional and painful. And so, emotion code came up on the radar. I'm just like, oh, well, this looks interesting. I watched the videos. I thought, oh, wow, this looks really interesting. So I ended up becoming certified in it. But in my clinical practice, it just wasn't working. I just couldn't make a difference. So I tried it, and there's something to it, of course, because he's helping people with it. But for me, in my clinical practice, the results were not consistent. And I could not meaningfully measure those results. And so I can't ask people to come to the clinic for this if I'm not going to be sure about their responses. So I just ended up stopping that. But the premise, I believe, is very true. And this is why there are millions of books on diet, supplements, emotional issues, also musculoskeletal, because we're complex beings. And oftentimes it is a mixture of these three pillars of issues. And that's why all these approaches work. Some people, diet is 100% of the issue. Some people, emotional issues are 100% of the issues. And in my practice, musculoskeletal issues are primarily the greatest issues.
Fantastic. I'm glad I asked that question. Well, Rick, it sounds like the punchline here for a lot of people listening is that you have some simple guides. So if they're dealing with back pain or neck pain or hip pain, they can just go to your website. It's rickolderman.com.
Yes. Yeah. And there's some free stuff on there too. Don't forget, folks, to type in Fixing You, all one word, if you want 20% off of anything that you purchase there. But there's also some free things for you.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to get selfish again just before I let you go.
Yeah,
so what am I going to do at home to get the scapula and shoulder blade moving properly?
Yeah, so that's the tough one, especially after shoulder surgery, because that muscle is in spasm. It's hard to fix that on your own. But one of the things that I would recommend for you, Dave, are you familiar with the child's pose stretch?
I am.
Okay, so that is one that helps the scapula start to move better.
Okay.
And so your therapist was on the right track. I'm going to put the skeleton up. Well, actually, I'll use it. So your therapist was on the right track because they're trying to get you to raise your arm up overhead, right?
Yeah.
So what I have my patients do, when so the Teres Minor that I was talking about runs from the shoulder blade here to the arm bone. So if it's short or in spasm, it's going to drag that scapula up instead of letting the scapula muscles do it. So what
Yeah.
I have people do is I have them do that arm raise, but I have them with their other hand block the shoulder blade. So now you're getting the arm up without letting that shoulder blade move, and it's going to stretch that teres minor muscle and it'll allow freedom for the shoulder blade to actually start moving on its own rather than being drug around by that arm. And
Nice.
also, when that gets stretched out and that arm can do that, then you're not going to be overusing the muscles that you just had surgically repaired, because now they're not only lifting your arm, they're dragging this whole shoulder complex with it, and they're not supposed to.
Right.
It's supposed to
Right.
be the other way around, right?
Okay.
But until that relationship isn't fixed, you're going to continue to get impingement pain up in the shoulder joint.
So we'll rename this issue. Instead of fixing you, this is fixing Dave today.
Yes. Yeah.
And for those of you who aren't Dave and didn't just have shoulder surgery, go to rickolderman.com and tell us that 20% off code one more time.
Yeah, it's fixing you, FIXINGYOU, all one word, and you'll get 20% off of whatever you order there.
That's a nice discount. Well, Rick, anything you want to add before I let you go?
Well, I think the thing my focus is more on people with chronic pain, and and so I want to, because most people have been to a lot of practitioners, they tend to think that they're broken, and my message to them is that they're not broken. They just haven't had the right information yet. And I really think my approach is such a departure from traditional approaches to therapy. It has been a game changer for so many people, and I would urge you not to give up, that you're not broken. You just need better information. And I think I probably have it for you.
I love it. So Rick, thanks for taking the time. I mean, pain is obviously a lifestyle. It lowers the lifestyle of anyone who has chronic pain. So this is an important topic, and it would be a shame to go through life with chronic pain thinking we can't get rid of it when we actually can. That's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely my pleasure. And Dave, I thank you for getting the message out. And I'd be happy to come back anytime, and we can drill down into specific areas of the body if you have more questions, or I can help you with that shoulder if it's not coming along well.
That's cool. Actually, it'd be fun to poll my audience. Actually, about every 6 months, I'll do a poll of our customers to find out stuff that they're interested in and whatnot. And it would be interesting for me to do one about pain and pain management and see what specific interests they have, and to have you for another episode if that's something that, we have quite a few people with certain needs. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love it. Yeah.
I'll add it to my next questionnaire, and we'll see what people say.
Cool. Thanks, Dave.
Well, thanks again, Rick. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.